Quincy, thank you. And thank you for your leadership in helping to put this together on behalf of Network, and to Democracy 21, to Matt Keller, who really put this together. We're all in your debt for doing that. I simply do want to acknowledge someone who I think everyone here knows, one of America's greatest champions for the values we're talking about, and that's Fred Wertheimer. From the time I first came nearly half a century ago, when I was 8 years old, Fred has been the leader that I followed on these issues here. And be blessed with Representative Sarbanes, and of course our greatest champion here on Capitol Hill, Senator Udall, is a particular blessing for us. I draw moral guidance for our undertaking this morning, most particularly the warning of the corrupting power of money in distorting good governance, from two sources. The first is the religious tradition, my own religious tradition in this case, but sharing values common to many faith traditions. And second, the observations of some 71 years of Supreme Court justices, long in the majority until Citizens United, and powerfully in dissent ever since. Now, thousands of years ago, the Bible warned against mingling money and politics. Deuteronomy 16 states, "You shall not judge unfairly, you shall know no partiality, you shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just." The Talmud asks in Tractate Ketubot, the Talmud being the great compilation of Jewish law that began to be put together at that time when Jesus of Nazareth was teaching, what is the reason for the prohibition against taking a gift? Because as soon as a man receives a gift from another, he becomes so well disposed towards him that he becomes like his own person, and no man sees himself in the wrong. Our tradition also speaks clearly, unhesitatingly, to the critical importance of appointing leaders according to their merit, and for maintaining the ability of leaders to act independently for the public good, unfettered by the demands of the wealthy. The Talmud again quotes the biblical verse from Exodus 20, verse 23, "You shall not make me gods of silver, neither shall you make for yourselves gods of gold." Since the fashioning of all idols, whether made of gold, silver, or wood, is prohibited, Rabbi Ashi in the Talmud explains that the verse actually condemns a judge who comes to his or her position because of silver or gold. The Shulchan Aruch, the authoritative 16th century compilation of Jewish law, goes further to state, if someone appoints as a judge a person who is not fit for that position, the person who appointed that person violates a biblical prohibition. If a judge was appointed on account of his money, it is forbidden to appear before him for a judgment. In today's electoral system, it has become too common for politicians to win public office because of the size of their campaign coffers. Our tradition's warning of the corrupting impact of money speaks across the centuries to us today. Capturing much of the same moral insights, I turn to the ethical wisdom in this matter in the thread of Supreme Court justices who for decades stood in majority defending the integrity of American democracy from overwhelming financial interference, and in the past 10 years have become dissenters in a series of Supreme Court decisions that have allowed corporate money to infiltrate our politics less transparently and in greater volume than certainly ever before. Justice Stevens phrased it eloquently in his dissent in Citizens United, the difference between selling a vote and selling access is a matter of degree, not of kind. Selling access is not qualitatively different from giving special preference to those who spent money on one's behalf. The dissenters warn clearly that allowing corporate money to flood the political marketplace would corrupt democracy, and alarmingly, they have been proved all too prescient. As the assault on our democracy continued 4 years later in McCutcheon, Justice Breyer added his own dissent. Where money calls the tune, the general public will not be heard. The decision, he argued, was one that fails to recognize the difference between the influence resting upon public opinion and influence bought by money alone. that overturns key precedent, that creates huge loopholes in the law, and that undermines, perhaps devastates, what remains of campaign finance reform. If the court and Citizens United open a door, he concluded, today's decision may well open a floodgate. And as Senator John McCain, whose 2002 bipartisan campaign finance reform legislation was washed away by a number of these cases, warned in 2014, historically we see reform, corruption, and reform and corruption. Right now, in my view, we're at the height of corruption thanks to the United States Supreme Court. We're here today from the religious community about to launch in an effort to mobilize the religious community for several key reasons. One, the manipulating, corrupting influence of unlimited, non-transparent money in our politics undermines so much of the work that we are trying to do day in and day out, working together to make a more decent, fairer, more compassionate world. Secondly, ask any senator or congressperson, I don't care, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, about the amount of time they are forced to turn away from their responsibilities to raise money, eroding their ability to serve their nation and their constituents, a dynamic that deters so many good people from entering politics. Third, such deterrence particularly has an impact on minorities and women candidates who often lack the economic, social, or political networks to access funds. Fourth, we've heard just before from Representative Sarbanes, the delegitimization of individual people and feeling they can make a difference in their democracy. All of that is undercut by this. Fifth, the gradual, insidious, reinforcing cycle of pursuit of money leads to dependency on donors. Engagement with donors leads to friendship with such sources that results, even if inadvertently, into enabling funders to manipulate the system and encouraging them to do so. Finally, it leads to vast sums of money, no longer transparent, that infiltrates the system, breeding suspicion, uncertainties, and mistrust of the American citizenry in our political system. At exactly that point, we need a renewed sense of common zeal for the rule of law and a political system that will live up to the ideals of our nation. That's what your bill was attempting to do. The bill that went through the House, the bills that you're talking about, to restore that sense of trust in our system by having an open, transparent, fair system in which the public persona of America is felt in our electoral system and our political system. And the religious communities here have, certainly since Buckley v. Vallejo, during when I first came, played a key role in expanding campaign finance reform, pursuing clean money approaches, calling for more consistent ethical standards, and ensuring, as they have done for generations, voting rights for all. For many religious communities, good governance, transparency in our electoral system and political system, including how it is funded, and voting rights, the realization of voting rights, the actualization of voting rights for each and every American entitled to vote, has been at the core of our work, and it creates exactly those conditions in which our abiding commitment to justice and inequality can flourish. I'm truly proud of the role that we played in the 5-year campaign that led to the passage of McCain-Feingold. I know 5 years feels like a long time that we have to go, but Fred, Senator, let me just remind you, it took Moses 40 years to get to the promised land, but get there he did. Well, we're proud of the role that we played, and we stand here today to affirm the strength of our commitment to make a difference once again. And if the courts of our nation will not act, then Congress must legislate an end to this pernicious influence of money in our political spirit. It is in that spirit that I express our abiding appreciation to you, Senator Udall, whose leadership has made such a difference, and our commitment to stand with you until we cross that finish line.
Yes.